As a confirmed ghost story and horror film addict, you can probably predict that when I head into Netflix, the horror section is where I go first. And Netflix's horror section is indeed impressive. I mean, they do have absolutely catastrophic schlock like killer mermaids and zombievers, but there's also a lot of quality in there. There is thoughtful, disturbing horror classics like The Witch, The Haunting of Hill House, and of course the original Candyman. And also they do have London 1920 if you've ever wondered what Bollywood's version of The Conjuring would look like. But this video is titled The Scariest Thing on Netflix, and you might be expecting it to come from the horror section, or you're a little more meta and you're thinking that this is a kind of lazy bait and switch title so I can make a joke about cuties, which is indeed profoundly disturbing. But the scariest thing on Netflix is not in the horror section. Everyone has seen it, and it's right here when they log in. Trust me, I have a point here. I'm going somewhere with this. The play something button was easily missed when it was tested a couple of years ago as shuffle mode or shuffle play. That came out in 2020. I would have been looking out for this, but I don't know, maybe something was going on. I missed it. Anyway, it was clearly successful and it was added to the home screen in 2021. Now, the implications might not register widely, but this really stood out to me. Now, the play something mode has Netflix basically just pick content for you based on what it thinks you'll like or thinks you should be watching. And that for me is deeply disturbing. I'm going to try and explain that. It might not actually make all that much sense to you. You might be expecting me to just list something that has a whole load of gore and torture, but I have a really high tolerance for those. This play something mode, it's a lot more disturbing in a way that I'm going to try and explain. It might not make sense to you, especially if you're a younger viewer, but I'm going to have to go back to the old style of TV watching to explain this. So back in the glorious days of the heights of Blockbuster, the internet had very little impact on TV viewing. You'd often have to check the TV supplement in the papers for the schedule or for specific films that were on that week that you'd like to catch. You'd have to highlight them and make sure you were in to watch that. And most people in the evening, they'd kind of veg out. I mean, there's no internet, so the TV was what most people went for. And by vegging out, I mean people would basically just sit there in front of the TV and see what was on. You'd actually end up just watching a show habitually that you didn't even like because it happened to be sandwiched between two shows that you actually cared about. You know, you had to be there to watch it when the TV was going to show it. Unless you fancied mucking around with a whole load of poorly organised VHSs so you could do a home recording of questionable legality. And this mode of TV watching is essentially quite passive. You just wanted to sit and watch TV, and the TV would basically show you. You didn't have much say in it. And that style of watching is pretty darn outmoded now. Only 5% of UK people who are 18 to 30 watch BBC One daily, whereas 80% of those aged 18 to 34 have an active Netflix subscription. So long before Netflix was making its own content and getting known for its creative and flexible casting choices, let's say, I was a big fan of them for what they'd done to disrupt the old TV viewing habits, which I just felt very uneasy about because of how darn passive they were. I was actually signed up to Netflix before they were Netflix, when they were Love Film, and they would actually post you DVDs. And I have to take this brief detour because it really cracks me up. You might wonder, if you're mailing DVDs to people, aren't they going to get wrecked? Aren't they going to get kicked around and scratched to buggery? And no, not in my experience. I had a really good time using Love Film. I only had one film that I ordered where there was a problem, where the disc was so damaged it just wouldn't work. And that film was Unbreakable. I appreciated that. I mean, I was mad. I wanted to watch the film, but I appreciated the irony. Now, back to Netflix as it now is. I really appreciated that with Netflix, with streaming, you were freed from the TV schedule. You were watching what you wanted, when you wanted. Now, obviously, Netflix does have some limitations. There is only so much content that it had on it, but the main thing it achieved was freeing you from the broadcast schedule and making you a lot more active in deciding what you wanted, when you wanted it, and how much of it you wanted. Now, the Netflix binge that it became known for, okay, it maybe isn't the healthiest thing going, but the binge effectively represented that freedom of choice that you had. It really is a massive change to viewing habits to be able to choose to just binge a whole show in one day, as I tended to do whenever Daredevil came out. You know, being able to take that decision to just go through the whole thing at your own pace in one day, instead of being dished out a single serving of content just drizzled with ads every week, that was a profound change. Now, if you had that lower time preference, yeah, you could activate it and still watch it once a week and make it a thing with friends. But the main thing here is it was your choice. You were in control of it. This kind of freedom and opportunity, even for something as trivial as film watching, is what I think of as emblematic of the best of the internet, where this new technology really did help cut through a lot of kind of unnecessary strictures and constraints on people that really sort of hemmed them in. People do tend to say that the internet was a lot like the Wild West in those days, and there's a lot of truth to that. There was kind of a lot of good about it as well. Those were better times, and instructional too. Whether positive or negative, Netflix would not be able to have such an impact on the memosphere if it didn't have such a big cultural presence. Okay, to be honest with you, I really just wanted to show that Shrek meme. I am very puerile like that. Now, you'll notice that I was referring to the freedom of the internet in the past tense. That won't surprise any of you. At this point in current year, the internet is very much back under control. It's the Wild West no more. It is now very much moderated, managed, it's regulated. Anyone on the internet now is basically living in the Janiocracy. Yeah, and that brings us back to the kind of depressing part of the video, where I'm going to try and convince you that the play something button represents something actually very disturbing. Wish me luck. Either way, what I'm really trying to get at here is that after the internet and Netflix helped us kind of throw off the shackles of the TV schedule viewing habits that I found so passive and depressing, we're back on the sofa again and we're watching Netflix in a way that is basically indistinguishable from 90s TV viewing. I mean, we've even replicated the old problem of everyone being signed up for a million cable services to get the viewing that they wanted by being signed up for a million different streaming services to get the options you wanted. Thank goodness for the high seas, eh? And you add to that the fact that Netflix have already confirmed that they are going to start showing adverts, and, well, we're back to square one. We're basically back in the 90s. I mean, garbage would be in the charts again, so it's not all bad. But the addition of the play something button, the whole point of this video, that is much more than a regressive step. It's much worse than that, and it's much more disturbing. For me, the real problem of the play something button is what it represents. And that is not just a return to the old school passivity of TV schedule viewing habits, where you just see what's on, you'd be like, let's find something, let's just watch something. But it's actually an exacerbation of that passivity. Now, the old way of viewing, the old schedules, they were mass broadcasted. They couldn't be selective. And so they have to try and generally satisfy everyone. And so these patterns emerged. So it has started raining really heavily now, and I do not know if the mic is going to catch that, so forgive me if it does. As I was saying about scheduling, children's TV was scheduled for when children got out of school. And then from about 5:30, you'd get content that's maybe a bit more mature, designed for teenagers, before their parents got home from work. And you know, the second film on a Friday night on Channel 5 would always be... Let's not get sidetracked here. The point is that mass broadcasting could mould audiences to an extent, but it's to a limited extent. And there's a very good chance that you would be kind of alienated by the schedule because it would be trying to show you stuff at a time that you're just not interested in. And so, because you've got no interest in the only options available, there's a really good chance that you're actually going to walk away from the screen. You know, maybe talk to your book or read a wife, I don't know. But Netflix has got around this problem because Netflix has an algorithm, and that algorithm can personalize itself to exactly what it thinks your preferences are, or maybe more accurately we could say what Netflix wants your preferences to be. And because of that personalization that the algorithm enables, Netflix is going to become much more successful at keeping you in that seat facing that screen. You're going to become really used to abdicating that basic choice of what to watch or whether to watch to Netflix.
Resume viewing. Resume viewing. Resume viewing.
With our increasingly weakened community bonds and our increasingly strengthened antisocial tendencies, worsened, exacerbated by 2 years of lockdowns, Netflix and other screen-facing activities have taken over much more of our lives, engendering a lot more of that passivity that I feel is really exemplified by that button. In my mind, when you press play something, you're basically clocking in for your Netflix shift and begging them to play something, play anything, please. Now, I could very easily end it here, having taken a swipe at Netflix and our other managerial overlords and, shaken my little fist at their technological revolution and its consequences, which have, of course, been a disaster for the human race. But that's a little too easy. It's a little too passive. It's letting us off the hook too much. Because, as Patrick Deneen writes in Why Liberalism Failed, these technologies, they don't really take off unless there's some kind of inherent vice or weakness in us that they can exploit. Now, Deneen was writing about Facebook and social media, and he highlighted the fact that we do have a sort of inclination to fear interpersonal interactions. Those can be scary, they can be confusing, unexpected, they can be challenging, they can be embarrassing, and Facebook lets us avoid that. And so we went for it, and our communities paid the cost. When it comes to Netflix, I feel it is our innate passivity and laziness that is being exploited, or to be accurate, I should say indulged. It is us indulging our passivity and laziness that allows Netflix to thrive and give us a play something button. It's very much our job to know what our failings are, to know what our weaknesses are, and to act virtuously in spite of them, to reject the pod, to say no to the bugs, and absolutely sign off before the endless Netflix content shuffle. And that is where I'm going to leave it, on my little soapbox there. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, well, subscribe if you're not already. Smash that like. You know all those things. You're a veteran now. I make these things occasionally. The next video I do is going to be much more in-depth. It's going to be on Invasion of the Body Snatchers, but that frankly could be a while off, and I just had this thought that I really wanted to share, partially spurred on by the story about Netflix getting adverts. That was really what motivated me. These ideas had been kind of percolating around in my brain for a while. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. If you want to hear more from me, I'm streaming on Thursdays at present, so Thursdays at 8 p.m. British time. We are covering psychological horror in July 2022. I know if you're watching way past that. Anyway, I hope you'll join us for that. Subscribe if you haven't already subscribed, and thanks y'all. Tschüss.